Welcome to the Thesis Study Lab's thesis preparation video. In this video, we're going to talk about illustrations. In thesis, illustrations are called figures, or in Estonian, joonis. And everything besides the text that is not a table is a figure. Doesn't matter if you have a screenshot, a graph, a picture, a drawing, a sketch, whatever it is, it's called a figure, or labeled a figure. In this video, however, we're going to call them illustrations. So those illustrations, they illustrate something you describe in the text. And they must be cross-referenced from the text. So you're describing something, maybe it's a game mechanic or a core gameplay loop, or the data you gathered from your testing sessions. So whatever it is, you should include an illustration that shows the thing you're describing. If you're describing your core gameplay loop, maybe you have a graph that has this loop and different activities on that loop, and then you show, look, this is the core gameplay loop. But it should still be described in the text. So an illustration by itself is not enough. It needs to be cross-referenced from the text and described in a reasonable way, of course, in the text, and it should illustrate some point that you're making in the text itself. If you have some graphs about the data, you don't have to describe like the entire data set and the entire graph in the text, of course, but there should be some key points that you want to bring out from that graph, and those you describe in the text. You reference that illustration or that figure, that graph, and that data or that thing you described should be obvious from the graph. Of course, there can be a little bit more in the graph than in the text itself, but still it should provide a solid illustration for the thing you're describing. In our thesis, we usually have one quality illustration for every 1 or 2 pages. So here is an example of an excellent thesis, 38 illustrations or figures and 48 pages. And you can actually get this big bird's eye overview of your thesis also from Scikit-learn, or in Word, I think you have the print preview or whatever. You can visualize your pages in this way. And here we can very easily see that okay, we have some title, we have a table of contents probably, maybe some info pages. And look, here we're already having a picture, we're having 2 pictures on this page, there's a picture here. And looking at it, it looks like these first 3 pictures are perhaps pictures of some other games. And here we have these blue pictures, so these seem to be screenshots or pictures of the game that is authored during this thesis work. And we have some UML diagrams, looks like, so some class diagrams, a flowchart, so something perhaps describing the implementation particularities of that game. And lastly, we have some charts, so probably describing the user feedback, so a bunch of bar charts. And in the appendix or in the very last page or whatever this is, there seems to be more screenshots. So maybe they refer to something that was brought up in the user feedback. So we can get a pretty good story about what this thesis is about by already looking at the pictures. But you can see that every page almost has like a 1 or 2 or maybe some have 3 illustrations. Of course, there are also pages that don't have any. But generally speaking, we have almost the same number of figures or illustrations as we have the number of pages. And in our lab, in the computer graphics and virtual reality study lab, when our theses are about, well, games or something visual, computer graphics, even if it's about a website, we really need to focus on making these quality illustrations. If you're making software development, let's say you still have your UML diagrams, you still have your figures, or even if you're making an algorithm, this can have a flowchart. If you're making UI, well, put a picture of that UI in your thesis. In the previous video, we also saw that you should have different stages, like you have your concept stage, so you have maybe a hand-drawn concept image, then you have your production stage, or you have your like result. Maybe you now did some testing and you improve that result, so you have your before and after pictures. So lots of things you can put into your thesis, and please do put them there, because illustrating your thesis with pictures is really, really important. A picture says more than 1,000 words, right? Now, when you're putting those pictures or illustrations in your thesis, one thing you should look out for is high resolution. So this is an actual figure from an actual thesis, and look, it's so low resolution that those labels are unreadable. Like, I know that this is view 1 and view 2, but if you don't know what is written here, it's very unreadable. What is this label? What are we actually seeing on this graph? Because the resolution is like extremely low. And this is from an actual submitted and I think even defended thesis. So don't be that guy who defends their thesis and then later sees that, oh no, my picture was so low resolution, no one is actually able to read it. and then you feel bad about your work. So already when you're making your pictures, use a high resolution so that people, when they look at your thesis, can actually see what you're depicting. Now, when you have labels on the figures, well, I would say that these labels or these texts should have the same size as the text surrounding the figure. So here we have the text surrounding the figure, so it's regular sized font in your thesis text. But then we have this picture, and well, these labels, they're kind of small. So now a person really needs to zoom in to read these things, and it seems like there are these small labels on the pictures, and the text surrounding the picture is like large. Now with this particular figure, I would increase the size, and look, we're also spending a lot of room here without any purpose. So I'll actually move this legend into the graph itself. So there is no data here, just move it here and make the graph larger so that you can use this white room or this empty space here as well. Like, you don't need to pack everything such that there is no empty space anywhere, so that's also bad, but here this seems really wasteful. Or you could also put this legend like under the horizontal axis somewhere or above here where there's no data. So different ways to structure this, but this is not very good. Now, when your labels are a bit bigger, it's better. So when they are a little bit larger than actual thesis text, I would say that's okay. But maybe it is a little bit too big compared to the text. It of course depends on the font and so on, but I wouldn't complain too much about this. But I would complain about this. This is very tiny compared to the actual text. Now here are some examples with okay label sizes. Although perhaps maybe this label is too small again. It should be a little bit bigger perhaps. But if we're looking at the labels or these texts over here, I think that's relatively okay. These S's and P's over here seem pretty okay. Same size as the text surrounding it. Here we have this position new and position collision, so pretty readable. Or here we have this matrix data storage array thingy, and these numbers are roughly the same size as this caption. So I would say that this is kind of okay, but if they become very tiny, then it's difficult to read your illustration. Now what else you can do with illustrations is, if you have raster images, you can kind of zoom in on a raster image to highlight an important region. So here's a very good example of this. So we have the overall view of the delta building in this delta building visualization project, and the student included ambient occlusion. And we can see this overall building, but it's not very obvious where is the ambient occlusion if we don't know what to look for. So the student has highlighted that, look, in this square, and if we make it larger, so this is the same image actually that's in here, just enlarged, we can more clearly see that there is some ambient occlusion happening on the walls and floor here. So you can just add these boxes and zoom in on your raster image to highlight important regions. And I think this is a very good way to visualize something important on a raster image. Just circling it is or just having this small box is one way, but I think blowing it up and zooming in and creating this zoomed in view on top of the original picture is much better. Now, if you have some sort of a progression, like something happens and then something else happens and then a third thing happens, well, the problem is that you can't really put a video into a PDF. You can have video clips in the accompanying files, and you probably should. So if you have a video clip of some specific thing happening in your application or in your game, then you should have a video clip of that and you put it in the accompanying files. So when the opponent doesn't want to run your code, or maybe even can't run your code, they can just click on the video and see what you meant. So that's a very good idea. But to incorporate this into your actual thesis, into the PDF, then you can have different frames in a sequence. And you can of course describe those frames. So what's happening here is that we have a situation A, then the following situation B, and the following situation C. And the label or the caption here describes that this illustrates how to open a door using a button. And at figure A, we have the player standing in front of a button. At B, we see that the player has stepped on the button and the door opens. So the player learns that, okay, this button does something. If we press on it, the door opens. And C, the player looks at a box and sees that they can pick it up, and they put the box on the button to keep the door open. So this illustrates this one sequence of events, or this one mechanic, one game mechanic that players will learn, and we can see from the PDF that this is how it happens. And next is an example we already saw in a previous video. So we have some before state and an after state. And I would perhaps put the before state to the left and after state to the right, but this student decided to put it the other way. So basically we have something initial, so initial building model, and we actually have the same scene, and now this image is basically cut in half. So this is one image, one figure, figure 21, a screenshot that compares the previous state and the new state, and they have cut it in half and showing that half of it is what was before and the other half is what we made or what was changed. And this is, I think, very good way to describe like the same scene, how it was before and how it is after. But this only works if you actually do have like a same scene or a same like environment that is logical to kind of put on a one image and split it. But it's a technique you can do. But here is an example of a similar thing, except that, well, we cannot put this in the same image, so we make two images. Here we have an illustration of this menu. So this was a first iteration of the menu. We can see there are these buttons. So it's a view of the 180-degree crystal menu. So this was a design for VR that was made. And the author, of course, describes this, how it worked. And they described that it didn't really work well. So having those crystals in the air and the player having to shoot those crystals didn't really work that well. So they redesigned the menu and they redesigned it to be these labels on a tree. So we have the same things, new game, continue game, quit game, and home village in the bottom here. So it's the same buttons basically, but a different design of the menu. And now it's two different images, the first iteration design, the second iteration design. And people can see that how did it change, and in the text, of course, it should be described why it was changed, what were the problems with the previous one, and how is the new one better. We also talked about this particular topic in one of the previous videos, but when you're testing, or let's say you're showing your game at an expo somewhere, or you're collecting user feedback, or you're in this specific environment that you're using like a physical place somewhere for your thesis, then take photos of it. And don't forget taking those photos. Students often forget that, oh no, I needed to take a photo as well, and how do I get this photo now? Did you take a photo? No, oh no, where do I get a photo? So take the photo yourself or have someone take a photo of you or the testing environment. For example, there are three pictures. So this is a screen in the main library building. So there was this huge screen on the wall, and we tested the Delta Building visualization project on that screen because it was large enough to actually test. Or here's a very rigorously controlled office, or here is a computer lab where we had a game and there are lots of computers and a bunch of people came in, played the game. It was a multiplayer game, and well, this is the testing setup that they had. So this picture really tells a lot. People can see, okay, there are a bunch of computers, they are sitting this way. They really get the picture in their head that, okay, this is where the testing was done. Or if you have an expo, then you can see that, okay, this is the expo that the feedback was gathered in. Instead of them having to like trying to imagine like what even is an expo or what kind of an office or what is this screen that the person is describing with text in the library building. I've never seen it, so I have no idea what it is. So having a picture really helps the reader to visualize and see exactly what was the environment. Another thing that is really important is have screenshots of your software, of your game or website or whatever you're making. If you're making one, then put pictures of that into your thesis. And I would even suggest having some number, maybe 2, 3, 4, depending on how big these screenshots are, at the end of the introduction. So in this particular case, the introduction let the reader in that there is this problem, game engines are slow, we're making a mobile game, we are not going to use game engines to have less impact on the battery usage and so on, and the game that was made is now visible like on these 4 screenshots. So we made this game, it's 4 screenshots, look at these, and now we're going to go into like how we made it and why we made it this way. So having these big screenshots or like maybe even one hero screenshot of your work in the end of your introduction, I think this is a very good place to put it, because the reader can see that, yes, this is what you made, I understand now. Instead of them having to read through all of the text and then maybe in the end you might have one screenshot or maybe you forgot to put any screenshots of your game into your thesis and then all they can do is imagine what you made. So don't do that. Don't let the reader try to imagine what you made. They should see what you made on the screenshots and even on the videos that you put in the accompanying files and so on. So these hero screenshots or screenshots of your work should be in your thesis. I recommend to put them in the introduction. If you don't want to put them in the introduction, maybe put them in the appendix. You can have appendix A, screenshots of the game. And then you put 4 screenshots there. There's 2 pages of screenshots. Very nice. And you refer to that appendix. Maybe in the introduction, you say that I made, or like during this thesis, this game was made. Look at the appendix A. People go to appendix A, see, oh, pretty nice. And now they read how you made it, or why you made it even. But having these pictures, these screenshots of the result, not just like testing that there was this bug, look, here's a screenshot of the bug, not just those, but actual screenshots of the result, the game itself, like you would put on an itch.io page. I think that's very, very valuable for your thesis. Now the illustrations you make, you can reuse them. So you will have several things coming up. Your thesis, of course, the PDF document that you will create in the end, or that you're currently creating a draft of and then will work on it a lot. But you also have a poster session coming up, so you need to design your poster. You need to put some illustrations on it. If your poster is a wall of text, then that's a bad poster. So you need to have some pictures or illustrations or graphs or whatever you like, screenshots, whatever best relays your project to viewers. So the illustrations you make, the screenshots you make, you can reuse them in the poster. And of course, very importantly, you have your defense coming up. So you need to defend your thesis. And you, well, most likely will make slides for your presentation, yes. So you can put the pictures on the slides as well. And you can reuse them on the slides. Now, there will be some things that we will discuss those later. Because the illustrations in your thesis usually have a bit of a different graphical style or visual style than the ones you can use on your poster or on slides. Because on the thesis you can put lots of details on the illustrations. But on your poster and defense slides, they should be bigger because they're big and there's an audience that needs to see them from afar as well. So they should be bigger, they should convey these points more accurately. They are kind of like polished, larger versions of the illustrations you use in your thesis. But regardless, if you don't have anything and now you suddenly have to make a poster or defense slides, that's still gonna take you a lot of work. So it's better to make some illustrations already, put them in your thesis draft. You can keep working on illustrations, and when the time comes to make your poster and your defense slides, then you can reuse these, maybe modify them a bit, zoom into some places or make them more suitable for a poster and slides, and that will be less work and this will be much more efficient. So the takeaway from this video is that illustrations are called figures in your thesis or joonis, and you really need to work on creating meaningful illustrations. We didn't talk too much about what is a meaningful illustration, except that it needs to support something in the text. It needs to be described in the text, and it needs to kind of synchronize with the text. But try to really practice on creating those illustrations. It's not just that you take print screen and screenshot and that's it, but it takes work and practice to be able to make meaningful and quality illustrations. But of course, yes, take plenty of screenshots and photos. Besides just your thesis, you can reuse these illustrations in your poster and your defense slides.